Well, it's important that I'm joined with Mayor Kristy McBain today, and there's a number of things that I do want to talk about, most importantly. The New South Wales Parliament in sitting this week is an incredibly special and important commemoration of the lives lost over this fire season, and particularly to pay tribute to the men and women of the Rural Fire Service. Even as we speak, there are volunteers on trucks out in those coastal valleys and ranges, up in the Monero, keeping people safe, protecting property, and yet today we still face the potential of losing more homes and more people at risk. We need everybody to follow that advice that the RFS are giving, but the Parliament, in coming together, is able to commemorate those who've given so much and lost so much as well. Beyond that, can I also particularly thank the Rural Fire Service, but all the agencies that have been involved. Our community needs to get the message very loudly that we're not out of this by any stretch. We have another 2 months of pretty difficult fire season ahead, and I know that whilst people are getting well supported, we need to be mindful of each other, which brings me to my important point today. I am very concerned about the mental health and well-being of us all. It's not just those who've had a fire come through their house, but everybody in our region who needs support. For this reason, today, I'm urging anybody who wants to donate to bushfires, please give to Lifeline. Lifeline is going to be there in the long haul for our community, but particularly for those who might be awake at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, who need to reach out. There is no shame at all in putting your hand up to say that you've been traumatised by what has happened in recent weeks and months across New South Wales. I myself have been very open about the need to get trauma counselling and ongoing support as a result of the impact of the fires. It's terrible, it's heartbreaking, it's challenging, and what I'm seeing across the community would break your heart. So I really just want to ensure that people, if they are going to make a donation, please consider Lifeline. It is the service, as I said, that is there at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, when you might be on your farm or on your block of land or even with loved ones. And to be able to get that support is going to be critical. And this is not going to be over within weeks. We've got months and years of recovery and rebuilding ahead. And that's why it's vitally important that I'm making this call today. Can I also acknowledge and thank the Red Cross? They have announced more monies today. I issued a challenge and they took it up, and to come and sit in the car with me for a day Saturday a week ago, and to now see that they're now going to provide more financial assistance across fire affected communities is really important. The financial support for those who've lost everything has now gone to $20,000 per household, and I would urge everybody to come forward and seek that financial assistance. Also today, they're providing financial assistance to burns victims and also those who might have structural damage to their property but mightn't necessarily have lost their whole home. It's really important that people do reach out in this regard. They can also reach out to St Vincent de Paul and Salvation Army, who were also with me on that day. And again, I'm very grateful for their support and their response to obviously the accountability that the community has been seeking in relation to charitable organisations. Also, in terms of the recovery, I think it's important that no one be left behind. We are seeing a wave-on-wave effect following the disastrous fires on New Year's Eve and the fires that have beset our region throughout January and will no doubt continue throughout February and March. The small business community in particular, I'll be seeking greater support and assistance from government in relation to them, and I know that Kristy McBain can I particularly recognise for championing that cause. One of the key things that I think is beneficial here is to see what we can do by working with local accountants and bookkeepers to be able to assist those small businesses who are having challenges with their cash flow at this time. Yes, the grant in terms of those burnt out businesses is important. Yes, the no interest loan, which gives the ability for small business to restructure their debt, is important. But because of the seasonal impact of the fires. There is a significant loss of income, and the flow-on effect for that is particularly to casual employees who don't have a workplace to go to anymore as a result of the loss in seasonal income in bushfire-affected communities such as ours. So I think it's important. There's been a lot of focus, of course, on how these grants go out. I still think it's important that middle bureaucracy does not continue to make it complex for people. And that's where case management through Service New South Wales becomes important. It's where ultimately it becomes important for people to be able to go into those recovery centres and see more outreach with recovery, to be able to get that information and sit down with people rather than just rely on hotlines. The only thing I will say also in closing before I ask Chris to say a few words, it is really important that people register through Service New South Wales for the clean-up. We need everybody to go to Service New South Wales, make sure that you register for the clean-up so that your home or your shed that has been fire affected, the debris can be removed. We have a very clear head contract in place to speed this up very quickly so that we don't have people psychologically affected by obviously the destruction that we've seen as a result of the fires. I also again would reiterate for local subcontractors who are going to be part of this cleanup, and it's going to be one of the biggest cleanups that we've ever seen in our nation's history, that local subcontractors come and register with Procure Point in New South Wales. Make sure you register as well so that you can be part of the big job ahead, and we can make sure that every single landowner is supported with this cleanup, regardless of whether you have insurance or not. Government is going to cover the cost of the cleanup, working with particularly local government authorities on where we put the waste, where we put the asbestos. So it's really important in that regard. So I apologise for talking so long at length, but ultimately these are really important days ahead for our community, both in terms of fire, but also in terms of recovery. I'll just hand over to Kristy to say a few words.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I thank you again for being such a great advocate, not only for your electorate, but for the wider New South Wales community, especially southern New South Wales. We here have talked about the significant impact that we have in southern New South Wales, the significant impact that we have for flame-affected residents, but there is not one person that isn't affected by this bushfire crisis here in the Bega Valley and right across New South Wales, extending down into Victoria on this coastline. So thank you for taking our points and understanding that it isn't just flame-affected people or businesses that are impacted, it is every single person in a bushfire region that has been impacted. We look forward to continuing to work with the state government and the federal government to make sure that the recovery and rebuild in our community takes place as soon as possible.
Andrew, back to your first point that you made, do you support Parliament suspending ordinary business for the week when it resumes tomorrow?
Absolutely, and so it should. We've lost, in excess of 26, 27 lives. We have quite literally thousands of people in this state who've been displaced, lost everything, lost their homes. So for us, it's very important that we do have the Parliament and the opportunity for every member of Parliament to be able to reflect their community, because it's part of the recovery and healing process. And I have every intention of speaking early on in the debate, probably getting back here as quickly as I can given the important meetings and community effort that's going on. And our community is one of the most humble and most beautiful communities you will ever see. The way people have rallied together, and it's lane by lane, it's village by village, has been so fundamentally important, and we've got to look after each other. We've got to reach out to those who could be left behind and say, no, we're not going to accept that. We're going to all pull together. And the Parliament, as a place for the community, quite rightfully should be doing this.
What do you plan on saying?
Well, you'll have to tune in. But look, ultimately, first and foremost, a huge thanks to the community. I mean, you cannot get through this natural disaster in the way that we have had we not had that strength and character in our community, the people who make it up. And there is just so many people who've just done brilliant and amazing things. It wouldn't matter if it was a fiery saving a life, a community leader running a relief centre, our police force, our RFS. Now I'm in trouble, I'll just have to keep naming everyone. But it is just that whole community spirit. Even the way in which our local media have worked in to make sure that people are in tune with the impending dangers and by rights. And it's a tragedy that we've lost life, but we could have lost so many more had it not been for the great leadership that we've seen from Shane Fitzsimmons and the Premier down.
Do you think it's the best use of Parliament's time?
Yes, absolutely. Because if we don't have that outpouring of love and support in our Parliament, then what's the point of democracy? And ultimately, that Parliament needs to reflect community values, community spirit. And I've said, you know, politics over many years has dehumanised me. This event's made me look at things very differently, having seen what I saw on the day and what I experienced. And, you know, since then. So, you know, look, this is a very significant fork in the road for Australia. You know, it's time to put the arguments to one side, come together, find solutions, be strong about it, be mature about it, and our political leadership can do this. I'm absolutely more convinced now than I ever have been. The bipartisanship is beautiful if you think about it, because it does guide the community in its thinking and its shaping. So, you know, I think having everyone together across all political spheres is amazing. And, you know, even during the dark days of this emergency, I think if we can do it here, you can do it anywhere, including the Parliament.
The federal Parliament was thinking of something similar and having a day of mourning on their first day back. I take your point that it's important for that sense of healing, but when you talk about leadership from our governments, can we be seen to be doing more, something more tangible than, I'm guessing, a procession of politicians standing up and using the
Well, Ben,
to share their condolences?
Ben, I think but look, to be honest with you, Ben, you're seeing government working with the community now. I mean, recovery can't just happen by accident. You know, clean-up contracts just don't drop out of the sky. You know, it's part of that thinking. And there's various tiers of this recovery involving government. As long as it's done in partnership with the community, not dictating to the community, that's the key element. And what I'd say to government, which, you know, obviously I'm in this job, we can't leave anyone behind. You know, when I was down at Shire last week, to see that pain so raw, you know, people who've been living in the bush for, you know, in some cases years and years, sometimes in uninsured places, you know, living off savings week to week, doing it really hard. And you know, they're saying, well, what next? People who are in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s who've lost everything, having to rebuild at that stage of life. So I think ultimately government's got to be part of that journey, and we've just got to work together now. We can't keep having these big debates and big arguments because we're expending energy without working on solutions together.
On to another point you raised. What's your reaction to the Red Cross announcing it will double the amount of financial support it is providing to bushfire victims?
Oh, welcome it. You know, I think one of the things which was really important is that by having Poppy in the car as the New South Wales ACT Director, looking at the scale of this, I mean, no newspaper story or television picture can do justice to the widespread impact of this. It's not just about what's happened to homes and community, but it's also the individual and the ability to help the individual get back off their knees onto their feet. So, you know, I was horrified when that first statement came out that they were only expending $30 million, and we're so grateful to the generosity of Australians. And we still need that generosity in many ways. But I'm pleased to see that they are going to take it from 5,000 to 10,000, now to 20,000 for those who've lost everything, and then of course now going to support those who have structural damage, be it the loss of a water tank or, you know, structural damage to a property.
Kristy, federal government back this week, state government back this week. Council meets on Wednesday to address questions and concerns around fees and charges that council is responsible for. Can you update us on where council's thinking is at there?
Yeah, so council will look at waiving all development application fees, all fees for waste, demolition, excess water fees. We'll provide every rate relief or waiver that we can, as we did during the Tarthorn District Fire and the Yankees Gap Fire. A full report will be coming to council. There is a range of fees, and we want to make sure that we're assisting our community in any way that we can. So if there are concerns in the community about any of those issues, please come to us or walk into the recovery centre. We want to make sure too that the recovery centre, it's available for every person that has been impacted by the fire, not just people that have had destroyed properties or destroyed businesses or damaged properties. It is for every person that has felt an impact in some way. We want to be able to make sure that we can assist everybody in our community, and as Andrew alluded to, we don't want anybody to fall through the cracks, so please don't be shy about coming forward. We want to make sure that we can assist you and point you in the right directions for services.
Andrew's been very strong at raising, questions around the governance around some of those big relief agencies. Council's established its own relief fund. What sort of governance structures are in place around that?
Yeah, so Council has gone into partnership with the social justice advocates of the Sapphire Coast to create its own fund, which is the Bega Valley Disaster Relief Fund, and all those details are available on Council's website and Facebook page. There are a number of community funds that has also come up. I know Cobargo and Quorma have a fund, as well as Kaya. The council-led structure is one where there will be councillors on board, members of the social justice advocates, and also community members. So there will be guidelines put in place, and we want to make sure that those funds get out to our community to assist as soon as possible, along with the other funds that are available from the charities.
Mr. Constance, if I could just ask you a question. On ABC Southeast Local Radio this morning, you mentioned your suggestion of helping the retail sector and casual workers with income support. Could you explain what that is? Could you just elaborate on
Sure.
that plan, that intention?
The secondary wave of this crisis is those businesses, small businesses along the coast who've lost, obviously, the benefit of the season. I mean, we have tens of thousands of tourists turn up. So there's lots of small businesses as we speak who are receiving invoices for the stock that they've just received over the last 2 months, knowing and thinking that they were going to be able to get it out the door. So the biggest concern that I have is cash flow of businesses, and obviously the first wave of those who suffer in this circumstance will be obviously casual employees. Now, yes, there's the ability for people to gain support through the New Start allowance and the like, but what I think is really important is it's vital that government does have a look at what can be done in terms of those small business communities. There's a lot going into, obviously, looking at what we can do to activate and get more people here over the winter months. Marketing campaigns, supporting of festivals and those types of events, even country shows. But I think the main thing is, as we've seen, hardship for small business. The bit of feedback that the Mayor and I are both getting, and actually both Mayors are getting, is how do we get through this without cash flow? So I am going to push it internally. I'm saying it publicly because I've been asked. And I do believe that ultimately we've just got to try and find a way to do that. And it is possible. I mean, there is hardship payments that can be made. I've just said this morning that I think we need to engage with local accountants, bookkeepers, and get a real feel as to what the true extent of the challenge is. And that's something which is also very important. That said, though, at this point in time, my primary concern remains getting people housed, getting people back to where they want to be, if they want to go back onto their parcels of land, and our mental health. And I'm seeing too much impact from, those terrible fire days that we've had. So we just need to be very mindful of that and prioritise this as part of the recovery. And ultimately, the clean-up becomes important as a step forward in that regard.
And touching on that as well, the destructions of homes in the last 48 hours is obviously a concern. Yesterday, Kristy, you mentioned that dozens have been lost, but Constance, I believe at the start of the interview you mentioned 26, 27. Is there any clarification on how many
in terms
houses?
of lives? Sorry, I was referencing obviously
Houses?
a significant number of lives lost over the fire season. But in terms of yesterday, I mean, one of the key things which is really important is we've got to rely on the RFS to do this. Now, they've got to be safe when they go in and do these building impact assessments. And unfortunately, at this time, there's very active fire in around the Toowoomba Valley. And there's a number of localities which are directly under threat. So we can't have anyone put at risk. We just need to wait and see. Hopefully, it'll be less than 10, but we've just got to wait and see until we get that information back. The other point that I would make is that no one should be complacent just because we've had a little bit of rain. I mean, even near our place, 24 hours ago, a tree's come down and it was still alight on the inside. So, we know that the Tathra fire happened on the 18th of March. We've still got another 2 months, unfortunately, of this terrible fire season. We need everyone to be vigilant, as Kristy keeps reminding the local community, so that we don't lose any more lives. And we saw, obviously a terrible fire up near Maria only a week and a half ago, yesterday's event. So it's going to keep coming at us. We've got to keep being strong. We've got to all continue to work together and follow the warnings so that we don't lose any more.
Kristy, did you want to add to that in any way in terms of numbers of houses and clarification on when we can get those results?
Yeah, look, as Andrew mentioned, the RFS were going out to do building assessments today where it's safe to do so. Those initial figures were looked at from what we would call an aerial survey, and those will be formalised in the coming days. But it's very true that we still have a number of fires in our landscape. There is going to be a point this afternoon which will cause significant concern to the RFS and to a number of localities in the Bega Valley, a number of areas that haven't been previously under threat. So the warnings need to be heeded. People need to understand that we aren't asking people to leave for no good reason. We're asking them to move out of the way so that the RFS can do their job more adequately. So we are still right in the thick of it at this point in time, and we will work with all of the agencies involved to make sure that the community remains safe.
Andrew, if I may just ask a question of you. You mentioned the Toowoomba Valley just before. There's a significant number of property losses that are outlying even these small villages. Is there a contingency in place to make sure those people are looked after mentally and they can get back there soon?
Yeah, I've talked about the recovery stepping into a phase where it's decentralised, both in terms of obviously the recovery centres at Bega and Batemans Bay and how they do that outreach. The CHI meeting the other day made it clear that 2 days in Eden wasn't enough for what was required there. But I think the big thing is that we have people who are on their properties, very traumatised, who are just going to need a gentle knock on the door and some support. And that can only happen by good local contact within community and just helping each other out. It was interesting having the Primary Industries Minister here last week because he actually sat down at a kitchen table on a farm and helped someone fill out a form. So we've just got to be mindful that it's hard. The other thing which, another problem that I'm picking up, those who were in dwellings which weren't legal or, I wouldn't describe them as illegal dwellings, they're people's homes. But ultimately there's an issue where people didn't have a development approval and therefore there's a reluctance to come forward. We need everybody to come forward so that we can work through this together. No one's going to get penalised here. We just want to be able to support people. No human life is worth this. And I am very, very worried about what is going to unfold over the weeks and months ahead in response to the trauma that's happened for so many. I mean, this is not easy. Look, we do need to reach out to everybody. There is a lot of people who are isolated and in communities which, as you said, are isolated places, and we've got to give them as much love and support as those who might have been affected in suburbia as a result of these fires.
Can I just throw one more question to you? Chris, you're talking about Wednesday's meeting being looking at fees, waiving of development application charges. Is that something, have we got a commitment from state government to help out in that respect, or is there, how does it...
Yeah. So, I mean, look, in terms of, Kristy mentioned waiving of tip fees, that's all part of the clean-up costs, right? And the reason we're doing that is because we want as much money in people's pockets to either purchase a new home or rebuild, regardless of whether you're insured or not. So that's vitally important. Anyone who is struggling out there does need to get in contact with the disaster welfare people within the recovery centres and start to get the ball rolling, particularly those who might have been in dwellings that didn't have development application approval, because they themselves are entitled to disaster welfare support like everybody else. I think that's really important. The other thing is that the government itself is looking at how we can improve the planning system in conjunction with councils to make it easier for everything from rebuilding. Rob Stokes at the moment is looking at everything from a standalone SEP to be able to help with the rebuild, through to obviously the announcement that we're going to extend temporary accommodation exemptions from 6 months to 2 years to give people plenty of time to work through what they want to do. So if you've got a temporary accommodation solution for your property, obviously instead of having that 6 month requirement, it'll go to 2 years. So they're the types of things that are being looked at to make it easier for people to be on their own block. And I welcome anything that local government can do. I mean, we're there to assist. We'll help with the rebuilding of the timber bridges and the community halls and those community assets that are lost, so that the ratepayer isn't left exposed as a result of this. We want to work with local government at all levels. The recovery process is local government recovery teams working with state agencies, the regional recovery team, and then of course what's happening at a state and federal level in terms of the coordinators, Dick Adams and Andrew Colvin. So it's a good model. I believe it'll work. And then of course with the cleanup, ultimately we've got to work in partnership with local government, given that there's over 800,000 tonnes of debris that has to be located across both the Bega Valley and Eurobodalla Shires. And unfortunately there's a lot of asbestos in amongst it as well. So we've got to work through that. It's not easy. The local tips can't handle that degree of waste, and that's why we've got to build capacity as we move through this. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.